All right, so welcome everybody to our second session. This is Olga Petrova, our guest of honor. She completed her BS and her PhD at Binghamton in 2009 in biochem, cell and molecular biology, working in Dr. Karen Sauer's lab. And after pursuing two postdocs, one at BU and one with Roche, I think I said that correctly, Olga joined the Office of Entrepreneurship and Innovation Partners, beginning her career in technology transfer as a licensing associate and is now the assistant director there. So go
I'm
ahead and
just
take it away, Olga. Yeah.
I was just going to say that the thing was not for your pronunciation of Roche. So we did the postdoc fellowship with Roche. It was an external one, so I want full transparency. I was still working here at Binghamton, but I had supervisors from Roche, got to travel to Switzerland to do some training there, but it was still an external one, continuing the work, the biofilm work here.
Okay. Wow, that sounds incredible. That must have been a lot of fun.
It was fun. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, so just tell us a little bit about what you do now, I guess, and how you got there and how you left academia and why.
So, and I don't know if you can hear you might have distractions from the cat who managed to mute me twice on the previous meeting. So maybe that entertainment will be forthcoming. So it's, I was in academia for quite a while. Now that I think about it, it's close to a decade after I got my PhD before I actually left academia. I think my first foray outside of academic research was actually with Dr. Davey. So he's got Excelsior Biofilms. And before Excelsior Biofilms was Excelsior Biofilms, when they were just doing pre-seed workshops and exploring that possibility, that's how I got exposed to technology transfer. So this was way back in the day before even the company got formed, but that's how I got to find out about startups, have a little bit of that business experience. Well, not business, but startup some of the startup training, and there you go. I knew this was going to happen. And the second exposure was Roche. And I think that's when I started thinking that, hey, I met some very interesting and cool individuals and talked to them a bit about the various development programs that they had in the pharmaceutical companies, scientific rigor there, how science is done, because there's a common, I wouldn't say misconception. Of course, at the end of the day, it is business, and they're very specific. You do have less creative liberty, obviously, in pharma and industry, but the people that I had worked with, they were heading up their own projects. So there's definitely room to work, but of course it is a lot more stricter, a lot more rigid, a lot more of that rigor that's involved in terms of reproducibility, in terms of, hey, this has to be really effective. But at the same time, it's like, hey, some of the preconceived notions of industry started falling apart. It's like there's still pursuit of knowledge, there's still questioning, there's still very interesting science going on. The very diverse group of the fellows that were brought together in Switzerland and then in Denmark, for some of the networking events that they did. So sort of started, it's like, hey, this is interesting. And then with the exposure to the technology transfer office, I actually asked them whether they had any kind of fellowship programs or any sort of internship. And at that point, they didn't. So I also went to Cornell, but they only had it for internal ones. So they wouldn't take me for the technology transfer. So I actually hunted down our tech transfer office, and they're like, hey, all right, fine. Do a couple of bio cases. And half a year later, the rest was history when they're like, all right, you know what? We have the pharmacy school that's opened up. We're going to have a bigger portfolio. All right, let's try this out as an actual position. So that's how I started, so how it started, how it's going. And that was purely just technology transfer when I started, but now I do quite a bit more in terms of entrepreneurship, and Kimchi knows about this because she's a part of one of our accelerator programs. So I can sort of run through what it is that technology transfer does and what additional things that I do. So pure technology transfer is technology transfer offices exist to help get university innovations, university inventions out of the lab into practical applications, which involves patenting, evaluation, getting contacts with industry for sponsored research, for additional collaborative developments. So we manage all of that, and that's really traditional technology transfer. You get university professor or student coming to you saying, "I have a new invention. This is what I discovered in the lab while I was running experiments uh, for a certain project. This could have practical applications." So we do the evaluation. We figure out, hey, is this patentable? And I can go into patentability, but this is probably beyond the course of this. But and is it also commercializable? Hey, are there real world practical applications? What diseases could this be applied to? What is currently used for these diseases? What's the standard of care? How does it compare in both molecular mechanism versus what would have to be done for regulatory? So we do all of this analysis before we decide, are we going to file a patent? And if we do, coming up with claims. So you're actually, for all the things that I'm describing, you're actually would be using your scientific background. So I think for those of you who don't like reading scientific literature, I might be reading more scientific literature on a regular basis than I did in grad school and as a postdoc, because for each case that comes in, I have to do the background, first of all, whatever the research group provides me, all of the background literature for that. And then I also have to take a look at, hey, has anybody in the field done anything similar, and compare that for patentability purposes. And then is this something that can be translated into medicine or some kind of a research tool, research reagents? So it's quite a bit. It's not just, paper pushing administrators, which some people do think that that's what we do. But at the end of the day, we're going deep into the scientific analysis. I also write a lot of grants, but that comes in a different part, which you don't necessarily have to do in technology transfer. So that's technology transfer. But also we do entrepreneurship training and startup company activity, because that's the other end. With Alexa, you already mentioned that you're going to be with interest in startups. So with startups, a lot of the startups do start at universities, and we call them spin-out companies. So the inventions that are made at the universities, very often, in order to get them to that place where they can become real-world applications, a big company is not necessarily going to come in and be like, hey, yes, we want to license this. You have to develop it, get it to a point where a big company's like, okay, you've de-risked this enough. Okay, you've done the regulatory or the safety or something. All right, good. But now we can license it. And very often that's where startups come in, because, like Moderna was a startup. BioNTech was a startup. It's not Pfizer that came in and saved the day. Hey, thank you. I got my second dose on Friday. But you had the startups who were doing this in order to get it to a point too. So we work with startups. We work with university startups, advising them and helping them get along, get funding, do the development. So that's a very big part of what we do. Not every technology transfer office does that. Some technology transfer offices just stick to, hey, we're technology transfer. If you want a startup, we license it to you. You go to an incubator somewhere. But we're fortunate enough, we have our own incubator. So we call it from cradle to grave, where you come to us with a university invention disclosure, we can take it all the way to a startup where that startup goes into our incubator and we're advising that company through. So, and a number of programs that we run that deal with helping academics such as yourself get that preliminary education in entrepreneurship. So we have accelerator program, the Exceed Accelerator program, a program through the NSF innovation course. So we run a couple of those. And I know I kind of information dump. So feel free to, feel free to jump in, ask. So yes, so the startups, it's an interesting question. The startups and spinouts that our office oversees the Kauffman Incubator, which also has the 7-tier clean energy incubator. So those two have companies from all over the US and even international. So for instance, we have one company out of New Zealand. We have one company out of Ireland in the 7-tier clean energy incubator. But I predominantly work with Binghamton, although as Kimchi will know, will attest, with our Exceed Accelerator, we've actually accepted one academic team from Upstate Medical University and one from Stony Brook. And the other thing is, yes, we do technology transfer for Binghamton, but for instance, and just to show you how opportunities grow, I literally just started doing technology transfer for Binghamton only life sciences, and now in 3 years, this is all the stuff that I do. There's more. There's more. We work with the Central SUNY office to also do technology transfer for Upstate Medical, for instance. So we also help manage the Upstate Medical technology portfolio.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Oh, and on top of that, the NSF program, Innovation Core, I also work as an independent contractor teaching in the national program for the NSF now. And these are all connections that's all happened in the last 3 years.
Wow, that's insane. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. But this is why it's difficult. There's that uphill battle in the beginning of leaving academia because, hey, you don't have that experience. You can talk about your translatable skills, and sometimes you have to really push for those. But once you do, it does start building, and the connections are very, very important.
Yeah, definitely. What tips do you have for students looking to leave academia for networking or even networking now during their PhDs? Maybe looking for internships or something. What helped you? How did you spiral into this craziness that is your life?
So it is definitely connections. And this is something that I don't think too many people, we don't want to acknowledge this, but reaching out and talking to people and getting yourself in front of people is super, super important. Applying to a lot of, so I think that you had Diana before, and she probably talked about how many different positions she applied to. And again, that was so difficult, but then after she had that first position, it's like, hey, the whole world was open. But reaching out and putting yourself in front of someone is really important because just sending in that resume, even if it is good and competitive, sometimes is not enough. And that personal connection, personal touch is super, super important because, hey, I'm teaching in the NSF program, not because I applied to teach at the NSF. It's because through people here at Binghamton, I worked with a couple of Cornell people, and the Cornell people like, hey, we like what we saw. How about you teach with us? And then it spiraled out where through them, I got introduced to somebody who is at Georgia Tech, and now I taught with somebody at Georgia Tech through this. So it is as difficult as it is to hear. A lot of it is personal connections, and I said it during the career panel at the symposium. I'll say it again. I know how difficult it is to network for some people. I was that person. I was that person who was standing in the corner at the reception in the conference and like, no, I don't want to go talk to people. No, I'm going to stay with my friends. I'm going to stay by my poster. It's very difficult, but if I could go back and change that, I would. So if you are that very shy, reserved person, I know it's difficult, but try to break out of that comfort zone. I know it might seem impossible if you're not that person, because if you tell me from a couple of years ago that I would be doing this, and I wouldn't believe you.
Do you guys have any questions? You want to jump in? I have a bunch of questions, but I'll let you guys.
Could you talk more about the incubator? Every time you say it, I think of a literal incubator with like you put eggs in and you just.
I was thinking the same thing, Kimchi.
And I just want to make sure I'm interpreting it correctly.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you asked because, especially in biology. Well, hey, you thought of, the one where you put the eggs. At least you didn't think of, we're incubating bacteria. So incubators are organizations that specifically exist to incubate small businesses and startups. And there are a whole bunch of different incubators. You've probably heard of the Y Combinator, maybe you might have heard one of the most famous ones, but they come in all different shapes and sizes. You have ones that are associated with universities such as ours. You have a whole bunch in Boston, New York City, Silicon Valley. For instance, Johnson & Johnson, when they shed their research groups, they actually opened J-Labs incubators, where the old Johnson & Johnson facilities are actually now serving as incubators for biotechs. And incubators usually bring together people who have business experience. And if it's a specific domain area, incubator, they will probably bring domain area experts. So for biotechs, they'll bring regulatory people together, and they will provide mentorship programs and other types of support for startup companies. And traditionally, incubators, I would say, are physical, where there's a physical building, and we do have that. So technically, you could go there now if you wanted to, but once restrictions are lifted, hopefully we might have an event. There's one. The location is downtown Binghamton on Holly Street. So I do recommend once hopefully. I think we're starting to hopefully see the light at the end of the tunnel. So go visit it. There are also virtual incubators, which is mostly programming and mentorship. But usually it's a physical location with dry lab spaces, co-working spaces. So this way, actually, startups all get together. You know, if you've ever watched Silicon Valley and you've seen all the cool boards that you can draw on, we have all of that. Like, we have the walls where you can draw on. We have a number of students who've taken up lab space in the incubator and are doing their things there. So hopefully now you won't necessarily, when you hear incubator, you won't think of eggs or bacteria.
How many labs do you guys have in the incubator?
Oh God, I should know this. So there's 3 floors, and I'm just trying to think. I should know this better. There's dry labs. I don't know, let's say 20 or 30.
Wow. That's more than I thought. That's really cool.
They're dry lab spaces and wet lab spaces. The wet lab spaces, they're not as many. Those are the ones that come with the fume hoods. They come with the connections for all the different gases, water, and everything. Most of them in the Kaufman are not hooked up, because we also have a startup suite on campus in the ITC building, which is somewhere in the basement of the ITC, where it's an actual outfitted lab space with, all your with your gas and your DI water, everything's there. So if it's more higher tech startups, they usually stay on campus in the ITC. Any other questions?
Should I go again? Olga, so I'm just genuinely curious, where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you see yourself staying at Binghamton, maybe becoming the director of the center, or?
It's funny because, it's when I think about my research career, which was spent over more than a decade, and just the 3 years here, I'll be honest, I'm still figuring things out, because I am very grateful for the opportunities that I got, because I got to experience both the pure technology transfer and the entrepreneurship training. So right now it's difficult for me to say, hey, do I want to stay in just technology transfer? So just to give you guys a little bit of context. So for technology transfer, if you go to a smaller place like Binghamton, you get to do the entire thing. You get to do the tech evaluation, help with the patenting, work with the patent attorneys. You do the marketing, you do the license negotiations. If you go so for instance, we have a number of projects where where our faculty collaborate with Mount Sinai, Harvard. So we work with their offices. And in the larger universities, you have very specific roles. You do licensing, you do patenting, you do evaluation. So this is something that if you guys are considering this. So, depending on if I want to move to other offices, it's something that I would have to consider. Like, am I leaving that entrepreneurship piece behind? Or would I rather go and work more for biotech? So right now I'm happy because I'm getting all of this experience from all sides. At the same time, also, again, to give you sort of an idea of when you start making connections right now, NSF They do have that Innovation Core program. They have their small business research grant SBIR program. So they have also, some of the people I know there have been saying that, hey, there's program officer opportunities at the NSF once you've had entrepreneurship experience. So there's a number of things that open up, and I'm still figuring it out, but I'm enjoying all the things I get to do and all the skills that I'm getting to get in this. So sometimes starting off in a smaller place is not the worst thing, because sometimes if you go to a larger place where there is a very clear division of labor, you get locked in. So that's one thing that I guess for people who are thinking of trying, and it's actually probably true in academia, if you're going to a smaller university with strong faculty, you might get to do more than if you go to a huge lab at a huge institution where, hey, it's very narrow focus. So if you are considering switching, sometimes starting with something that's not the biggest organization or institution can give you more responsibilities and more flavor. So yes, I did not answer your question. I'm being sneaky about it. I'm figuring things out.
Yeah, that sounds like really good advice. Also, just staying at a smaller company to start out with. That's definitely why I'm more interested in working at a startup too. It's because you get to kind of explore different avenues comfortably.
And one other thing about, for if anyone's considering going first, maybe working for a startup afterwards. So we can have a separate conversation of, hey, how do I figure out, should I go for the startup or not? Is this risky or not? So that's a separate one. But the cool thing about working, there's obviously risk, because of make or break. 90% of startups fail. And if they don't secure the funding, what happens to you? So you definitely want to know that they have either investor or government SBIR funding. But the other thing, if you go to a startup very early on, a lot of startups might not give you the best salary package, but they will give you shares. And if you stay with them for a year, 2 years, 3 years, you will vest and you will actually be a part owner of the startup company. So that's something that, if you guys ever thought about it, that's something that is, if you come in early enough, you might actually be like a part, tiny, own some shares of the company simply for working for them.
On that note, I've been reading a book, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, and he actually mentions in it, so when Facebook was founded, they hired a graffiti artist to come in and just make some murals for them. And instead of paying them, they gave them stock. And that stock is now worth, I think, about $20 million. So there you go.
That I did not know. Wow.
Yeah.
So there. Hey, you never know if you're going to, maybe you'll work for the next biotech, for all you know. And it's actually a pretty common, our startups haven't done it quite as much, but for instance, I worked with a number of Cornell startups, and it's a common thing. If a student starts a startup and they just bring on undergrads to work with them, it's like, I can't pay you, but I'll give you some stocks. So, but you have to, and then there's the vesting period. Obviously, if you work, for a month, you're probably not going to get the stock.
Should I keep going, guys? I feel like I'm being so rude. Seriously, just interrupt me if you have a question for Olga. So you didn't really say why you left academia, I guess, or if you would ever go back to it in the future.
So I think I'm in a funny position because, technically speaking, I've left academic research, but I'm still in academia. Kind of. I know it's not the same. I'm not doing lab research. I know, but I'm still at a university setting. I think for me, it was a long road, but at the end of the day, it was the figuring out that it wasn't for me. I enjoyed the research. I enjoyed learning about new concepts, but that next step of, hey, running a lab, focusing on the one thing, wasn't mine. Wasn't something that I wanted to do. And I always enjoyed. So when I was in grad school, I did have multiple projects. I always enjoyed. I don't want to say that I could never focus on one thing, but I enjoyed learning about multiple things. And in academia, again, unless you get really big, you are sort of focused on a very small niche area initially. And I think that combination of not being ready or wanting to run a lab and not wanting to focus on one thing, that sort of was which was something that it took a long time to realize. And I think part of it was that expectation. Hey, if I leave academia, I've somehow failed. And I don't think that's something that everybody has to kind of let go of. It's not for everybody. But that doesn't mean that you won't be doing science or contributing to science. It's just different.
Yeah, definitely. Plus, now so much of researchers or scientists research is heavily dependent on what grants they can achieve. So a lot of times they're not even allowed to be very creative with their ventures because they have to fit into this box of, oh, this is what the NSF will fund, or this is what the NIH will fund, and then they just kind of have to keep doing that. And then I think did you mention the reproducibility crisis, or was that something?
Little bit.
Did that
Little
deter
bit.
you at all? Because that's something that definitely deterred me.
It's something that, so I think this is where that Roche conversation with the scientists there, where it's like, coming from the academic background where we always, at least, hey, when I first came in and was naive, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed, it's like we're somehow intellectually and morally better than these people who are in the companies and they're doing this all for profit. And then you see everything that's going on. Not to say that, that all of science is like this, but, and I'm not saying that it's scientific misconduct, but I think science, especially biology, hey, all of us are biologists here. Biology is freaking complicated and it's ridiculous. And, if one day your DI water, RO water system gets clogged up and suddenly your bacteria are not growing, like in science, in academic research, first of all, it's frustrating. Second of all, it's like it sets you back. But at the end of the day, hey, we ran these experiments. It's good. We'll publish. But then somebody who is a couple of states away running different RO water can't get it to work. In industry, you can't do that. In industry, and I think there's absolutely value in having those incremental, hey, this works in this system, but it doesn't work in this system. It's absolutely essential because that's how some of those initial breakthroughs in science are made. Hey, this mechanism, but this particular target, but maybe if we change this, and then you do get to those really big effects and potential disease targets. But in industry, your rigor is so much higher where, hey, if it doesn't work in this system, but works in this system, we're probably not going to pursue that because you can't have that when you're developing a drug. So there's definitely a much higher rigor reproducibility standard. And again, not necessarily criticizing science that, hey, scientists are being dishonest, but it's the complexity of biology. And industry is forced because of what it is that they're doing. Hey, there are the Theranoses of the world, and there are some very shady science that sometimes happens in companies, but they are forced to work through those complicated issues of, hey, this worked in this system, but this didn't work in this system. They're forced to do it versus in science, hey, we published this, we got our triplicates, we published it, it's all good, but oh God, the water's not working now. What do I do? Oh no, I have to shift to a different experiment. Like you don't have that luxury in industry, which for better or for worse. So, but it's certainly, biology can be super frustrating, I think, as we all know.
Yeah, and just the need to publish or perish. I think just researchers feel like they do need to just, whatever results they have, let's publish them. Oh no, wait, it stopped working this month. It's okay, just leave it alone. It'll work, it'll be fine. There's actually a friend of mine, he wants to start a journal that only publishes research that focuses on previously published work in high impact journals and call it something like the reproducibility journal.
I think that might be a good idea because and that's how the system is set up, that you can't repeat, like if you repeat somebody's and try to publish, that's not novel, so why are you publishing this? Versus that's something that that is something that is needed. And that's the funny thing. So we've had part of our job is contacting companies, having conversations with them, introducing the science. We usually bring in the inventors later on for the more technical conversations, but you have no clue how skeptical the industry people are, where they're like, well, if you can send us samples and if it's not going to work in our system, we're not moving forward. Or can you show this, and this, because they've been on the receiving end. And that's the other thing. I've also been in the situation where I sell something in terms of, here's a beautiful flyer, here's the data, here's the publication, and then we send them the samples and they come back, it's like, how does this work again? This is not working in our system. And you're just like, okay, all right, well, we can't say anything. So they have very, very high standards for whether something works and whether something's reproducible.
Crazy. Very different.
Can I ask a question that has nothing to do with what you're just talking about?
Go ahead.
If you were to like tell yourself something that you know now, like to somebody who's just trying to figure out what the heck they want to do and get out with their PhD, like what is something that you wish you would have known?
I don't want to default to mine, just network more and talk, because that one, I just know, and I don't want to assume, because you guys are here and you guys are presenting and doing things and organizing. So you're probably already a lot more proactive and social than I ever was. Another thing, just even if you're not necessarily planning on leaving academia, just look at internship opportunities around the area where you are, whether it's something for the summer. Sometimes just look to give you an idea. And that's the question, not all professors and not all programs sort of give you the time or allow you to do that, but look into them so that you're more familiar with what is out there. Because again, it's not a simple split of academia, industry, startups. I had that one slide of all the people that I interact with on a regular basis, all of whom started in your shoes. Patent lawyers, patent agents, patent examiners, regulatory consultants, regulatory agents for EPA, FDA, you name it, CDC, technology transfer directors, VPRs. It's just, the list goes on and on and on of the opportunities that you actually have. So take a look at what is there just to see whether you could do some of this. So the question, how do I feel? I personally now, so if you were to ask me a couple of years ago, I'd probably be like, no, focus on your work because you want to graduate soon. Why would you want to do that? Now I feel that if you have the opportunity and it's not going to burn any bridges or anything or cause a major problem with department or PI, go for it. Absolutely. Because so for instance, I'll give you examples of people that I've recently interacted from BME department. There's one person who she did a summer internship with, I don't think she did it with Merck. It was, but it was a major pharmaceutical company in Jersey. Met somebody who connected her with someone from Merck. So she graduated, got a position in Merck, and now she got a very high scientific officer position at a startup after being at Merck for 2 years. Master's student in BME, who I know who did an internship. Again, Merck keeps coming up. And went back. It's like, hey, I'm going to do master's. Maybe I'll continue to consider a PhD. And they came back to him, hey, we really like working with you. How about we'll give you a permanent position? So those can lead to connections. So yeah, if you have the opportunity and it's not going to cause any major problems, I think it's good.
Are any of you guys looking into summer internships for the summer?
It wasn't, but I am now.
Yay!
And hey, it's all dependent because I know that the funding situations by PIs are very different, where if your PI is really, really, really well funded and you're covered for the summer, it might not make sense to, but some people do have to look for positions. And I've also seen, again, my cohorts and the ones who followed me a little bit where, because the PI wasn't paying or paying very little, what they would do, they would work at a restaurant or something like that while doing part-time work in the lab. And I'm no way knocking restaurant work. Hey, if this is what you want to do, absolutely. But at the same time, in your career development, if you're not thinking of staying in academia, does it make sense to do this half lab, half something that's not necessarily that's just going to pay the bills versus, hey, I can do a full-time internship at a company, get new experiences and get connections. So I think on balance of that.
Kimchi, there's a question.
that says, what resources are there for finding internships like this?
Well, unfortunately, at this time, our school I don't think is that good yet. I don't know whether you guys have anything listed. The internet.
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn is good. The other thing, this is something that from the I-Core, Innovation Core, when people literally have to reach out and schedule interviews with industry, alumni networks. So if you reach out, and this is for networking actually. So if, let's say you find an internship at some pharma company and you reach out to an alum who works there and say, hey, I heard about this. Do you know anything? They might be completely, I mean, pharma companies, large pharma is usually very big that if you find an internship and then an alum, they probably are nowhere near each other, but getting those, still reaching out and getting that connection. But yeah, LinkedIn, there are various, the online platforms, aggregators of positions, of opportunities where you can look for specific, and you might be more familiar with those. And sometimes just going to the company site as well, because they'll list opportunities as well. And if you're interested, if you're interested in tech transfer startups, sometimes just reaching out to them. They might not, that's the other thing. This is why I'm always like, reach out, network, reach out. Because just because there isn't an opportunity listed doesn't mean that they won't create one for you if you present yourself well enough and they're interested. I mean, if you reach out to Pfizer and like, hey, I want to work on a vaccine development, probably not going to. But if you, a mid-sized company or technology transfer office or something, then I'll be like, yeah, hey, we actually have a need for this and we have some extra time and some extra money in the budget. We could. So sometimes it's not looking for what's there. It's also just reaching out to places you might be interested in and seeing if they will have some opening.
Yeah, those all sound really good. Yeah, I'm actually doing a it's an unpaid internship with this woman who I met through podcasts, through Apple Podcasts. I know. But she has a podcast called Dr. GPCR, G protein coupled receptors. And I learned about them through my immunology class a few years ago. And then I found her, and then I looked on her website, and she was looking for people to join her team and really just get it off the ground. And she'd like to turn it into a consulting platform and a collaboration platform for scientists. So though I'm not getting paid, I think it's a really good opportunity for business development and just meeting other people. And I plan on doing it or continuing with it with them while I have my full-time job. So I don't know, there's things like that, but it kind of sucks that I'm not getting paid, but I really believe in the company and the woman who's running it. So I could do that.
So yeah, the unpaid ones, we actually provide internships with our startups, granted mostly with the clean energy, because those are most of the high tech ones, which is probably outside of the realm of what most of you guys would be interested in. From what I'm providing, whenever I provide something, it either has to be for credit because Binghamton has the CDCI program. So it either has to be for credit or the company has to pay or our office pays. So I kind of, from my my own business, I would never ask anybody to work for free. Well, to work for intern for free. But knowing experiences of others and myself, sometimes showing that dedication and, well, first of all, yeah, showing that dedication, getting those connections, sometimes it does pay off. It's a fine line of, are you just being exploited, or is there something that you will get at the end? So I hesitate in fully endorsing them, but hey, my own story started with that. So, one more thing. I just thought, because I just thinking of my own story. For any of you who are interested in writing, any kind of, scientific writing, anything, there are companies such as bioscience writers, so extra money on the side. But also, I think I became a much better scientific writer having worked. So I did a contract bioscience writers. I did contracted with them on the side while working in the lab. So
How did
explain
you find that opportunity? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Carmela.
Oh, I was going to say, could you just explain a little bit more about bioscience writers?
So bioscience writers, they're just scientific writers, specifically within the bio and biomedical space. It's contract writers. I don't know what the going rate is now. They have contract editors, so you do a little test for them, test sample, and then you become a contract editor that if they have a job come in, they send it to you. You have to, it's a pretty quick turnaround where you have to say within the next couple of hours, hey, I'm going to take this project. I'm not going to take this project. And the projects can be anything from a very simple, hey, this is pre-submission, just go through, copy edit very quickly, to, dear Lord, these are really like non-English speakers from a different country. You really have to rewrite the whole thing. My worst one was a 10,000 word manuscript that had to be cut down to 3,000 words. That was fun. There's grant reviews. There is preparing suggestions so you review and then you prepare suggestions for which journals to submit to. So there's a number of services, but the standard one that they usually ask you for is, hey, here's a grant proposal or a manuscript. Go in and do revisions. And they also tell you, we want very light, heavy, or really rewrite all of this. And they used to be $25 an hour, and you just log your hours. So, but that's something that.
That's a really good company idea. Wow. Cool.
Yep. There's another one, which is American Journal Scientists or something. That one, they were offering half the rate. I don't know what they're doing now, but bioscience writers were. And again, you are free to say no if something comes in as like, this is way outside of my expertise, or hey, this weekend I'm off. You also select your schedule. You select, don't give me anything on these days. So, and for me, I did enjoy quite a bit. I mean, part of it was just making money on the side. But the other thing is, I feel like it improved my writing skills, because this is something that, another thing for everybody, I think all of your PIs probably have very different approaches to how much you as a student write, and how much they're writing. I'm not saying one's better than the other, but I think everybody should have the experience. And I know some PIs who are very in control and you don't get to do as much, don't get as much writing experience. But try to get that writing experience, because written communication is also very important. So bioscience writers really also helped me improve, because my style, conciseness, just everything, doing everything quickly, that was a big help. And extra income on the side.
Yeah. Win-win. Okay. Well, that is our hour. That was awesome. I think this went really well. Thank you, Olga, for joining us.
Sure.
If anybody has more questions, is it okay if I put your email in the chat?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Let's see. And you have any closing remarks, I guess?
No, I think everybody, just good luck to everyone. Go enjoy the sun, the few rays of sun. But no, I think my big thing would be, look at what else is out there. Talk to people like me, Diana, others, and also looking back at mine, just because you leave science doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you're giving up on science. You're just potentially approaching it from a different perspective, a different part of it, different part of the process. And didn't mean you wasted your time in grad school, because the skills that you're getting are super important and super transferable to other professions and other careers.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what we're trying to get across with this little series here. But all right. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And thank you again, Olga, for being our guest of honor.
And one more thing, resumes, when you're writing, sorry, I just realized transferable skills. When you're writing your resumes, do not just, I have a line, I was a graduate student, I was an undergraduate student, I was a TA, and here's my big bibliography. Obviously, if you're going, let's put it this way, if you're going into academic job, that might be okay. If you're going for a job outside of academia, list that you supervised undergrads, that you helped with this dissertation, that you have break down your skills to highlight that you have project management skills, you have mentoring skills, break it down as individual parts of your resume.
Yeah, definitely. That's good advice. I think we should have some sort of workshop on resumes as well at some point.
Ooh,
Carmela.
next symposium.
Yeah. Okay, everybody go enjoy the maybe hour left of sunshine. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
Olga. Thank you.